Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to share my conversation today with my guest. Her name is Amber Tishner, and Amber is a coach and a speaker. She's focused on women who are ready for transformative change in their lives. She has a history in change management and organizational leadership, and she combines her strategic talents with grounded experience to help clients determine their path to passion and purpose. She helps women break out of their comfort zones and tackle big topics like workplace rivalry and how to sustain holistic balance in their life. Amber has a PhD in industrial organization psychology and specializes in aha moments. We'll find out what that is soon. Is the founder of 2B Coaching and Consulting, and most recently, she is the author of the soon-to-be published book, Behind Frenemy Lines, Rising Above Female Rivalry. And in her spare time, she enjoys having fun with her husband, 2 kids, and of course, the dog, Stella. Amber, thanks for joining us today and carving out some time. I appreciate it.
Well, Annie, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Likewise, I want to jump right in here because I have a lot of questions. I've read Amber's book. I have a lot of questions about your book, and I hope we can get to a lot of those today. And so my first question right out of the gate for you is, give us a high-level view of your book and what inspired you to write it?
Well, I'll start with the second part of your question first. So when I wrote my dissertation, I had to come up with a topic, and it had to do with something in the working environment. And so I knew I wanted to do something that focused on women. And then I saw this occurring, this rivalry and in between women. And I also saw that it was not talked about and it was ignored, but it was hugely disruptive to the culture. And good women walked, and it didn't feel maybe like a safe place to work if you had to, walk on eggshells. So that was what initially piqued my interest. And then fast forward, I wrote my dissertation, but in the interim, I was still collecting interviews from all these women because I was fascinated, for one, by the stories they had to share, but two, the topic, because for every individual, it's so very different. And so that's what really paved the way to write a book. And in my book, it's pretty much divided into 3 sections, and it talks about what rivalry is. In society, it's often talked about women being dramatic or it's a cat fight. So I really dive into, no, it's a lot more than that. And then I talk about the signs and what it looks like and how it can impact you at an emotional, a mental, physical level. And then the last part of the book, I talk about how to address it, what you can do to overcome it, and really how to find women that are like-minded. One of my favorite taglines is collaboration over competition. And I truly believe that if women work together, we can accomplish so much more than when, we're working alone or, fighting each other.
I agree with that 100%. So I want to go back to what you said about rivalry and what is it? And is there a difference between being a frenemy and female bullying? And if so, what is the difference?
I think there are differences. So how I sectioned it out in my book, I have a frenemy as a component of rivalry, a persona, so to say. And within that, there's lots of different types of frenemies, In terms of bullying, there are different levels of rivalry. There's envy, there's competition, there's jealousy. And so, I think a lot of the true rivalry stems from not being able to embrace positive competition. So from that, if it starts to escalate and grow, this could be anywhere, but I'll reference the working environment. It totally can switch to where it's a bullying type situation. And so it's a fine line. Again, every situation is different, but there are certain facets of it that totally can be complete bullying.
And what is your definition, and how do you use it in the framework of your book? What's a frenemy?
A frenemy is, let me think back to what I said. It's a friend and an enemy combined. And actually, you hear about it and you think, oh, that's like slang or jargon, not really a commonly used word. But when I really went back and did some research on it, it's been around for almost 100 years. Like, it's a true word. And I was shocked that that was it. But it's somebody that you can't live with, but you can't live without, type of thing.
Got it. And like you said, in reading your book, I was really, I guess I was surprised only in the fact that I hadn't thought about it, but women have been frenemies and having rivalries for, like you said, back 100 years.
I know.
That was
It's crazy
to me. Yeah. And what's the basis for that? What is the main reason that exists?
There's a lot of different reasons. For everyone, it is definitely unique. I think the basics of what it stems from is typically not about you at all. It stems from the individual that's projecting the behavior. And so with her, it's probably insecurity. She doesn't feel good about herself, a low self-esteem. Maybe it's the need for control. Who knows? It could be how she was raised, or she endured something like that growing up, and so that's a behavior she's modeled. But usually it's in low self-esteem and the need for control, and then not liking herself. Like, really, that is a big chunk of it too, being insecure in your own skin.
Yeah, because I noticed in the book that you said, and research shows, that this starts as early as grade school, and it really is prevalent in the adolescent years.
It is. It's huge.
And how does that show up in grade school? You have a first through fifth grader, let's say, little girl. How do they present? That you would think, you would probably take note that this is going to snowball into something bigger and could potentially be problematic the older they get.
Well, I'll give you a personal example. I've studied this, and I was shocked when my daughter was in kindergarten, and she was talking about these rivalries that were happening on the playground. And it was the rivalry, I use exclusion as a form of it, because that's often how it can start out. Or there's a queen bee, a stronger girl that may be the leader. And she was mentioning that, well, mommy, I wanted to play with some of these girls, but they wouldn't let me join the kickball or the volleyball or whatever they were doing out on the playground. And I said, well, why don't you just join in? Or, like, why do you have to ask permission to join in? And she felt that she needed to. And so I think it's learning those behaviors that you see on the playground, and then you're seeing who's the strong girl and who are the girls that are maybe more quiet and aren't standing up for themselves. And so that's how the cliques form, and that's how the ringleader begins, and then it can escalate from there. But grade school, I remember personal stories from grade school as well, and they stay with you. Like, especially you're at an age when you're starting to shape who you are and your voice. And then add on social media right now, like, depending on how old your kiddos are, that they're getting, devices to be on social media, and that adds a whole nother layer, which is, I don't think, always good. But
I agree.
Yeah. I think I'm like, no, you don't need that. Who cares if people like it? Like, it's not even real. Like,
exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, let's go. You broke your book down into 3 parts. We defined rivalry a bit in our previous conversation here. What are some of the signs that this is existing in a workplace? And I know it exists in workplace. It can be in a family. It can be in a church community. It can be just in your neighborhood. What are some of the signs that we could look for?
I think one of the first key things is it's very intangible. And so you might feel it, but it might be hard to pinpoint what it is. And so before you can really talk about the signs, it will start internally with you, and you'll question, like, well, she just didn't do that to me. Or why would she do that to me? I haven't done anything to her. So in a working environment, exclusion is one. Suddenly, maybe you're not being invited to meetings with everybody. Or somebody maybe is taking ownership of work you have done and portraying it as her own. Let's see, talking down to you behind a closed door, but then in front of other people is a very different type of person. Maybe won't be trying to think, in a meeting, like you could bring, like, I'll give an example of what happened to me. I knew something was going on and I tried to confront her with it, and she acted like nothing was wrong. So, like, gaslighting you. Oh, you're imagining that. That didn't happen. Or I never said that. Or you're totally taking that out of context. So, you know, things to kind of squash you down. Talking poorly about you to colleagues, but then denying it if you confront.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
And so do these women who are being the frenemies and being the bullies, depending on the situation, do they know they're doing that?
I've had so many questions about this. I'd say most of the time, yes. I'd say if they're good at it, they've done it before, and they know that it's a form of power and control. Sometimes they really might not know, and so you always want to give her the benefit of the doubt, especially if it's just starting out. And I also think you want to look internally to see what maybe you are exuding, if anything, to prompt the behavior. Chances you aren't doing anything, but often they're just not nice people, and it's worked to their advantage in the past, and it will, until somebody shuts them down and calls them out on it, it will continue to work for them. And so if nobody's calling them out on it, on the behavior, then it'll keep on going.
And I'm curious, I know you talked to a lot of women, and you've put this in your book. You interviewed a lot of women who had an experience of being, I don't want to say the victim, but on the receiving end of a frenemy. Have you ever had conversation with, and I don't know if they would even be willing to have a conversation with you, the perpetrators?
Very, very few, very few. And I would die for that. I would, just because I would love to know. The women that have mentioned that to me talk about it from like maybe in high school or middle school, but not, I've not ever talked to somebody that might be that type of individual in present day. I would think it would be very fascinating, just like you said, to know, is it purposeful or is it something that isn't? My thought, though, if it's a continued behavior, then how do you not know you're doing it? But a couple of women have shared, I knew I was not a nice person in high school. I regret that. I've made amends. And, you know, they're not blaming it on anybody but themselves, but they know they just hadn't grown into themselves yet. And now they're completely different and an advocate, you know, to stop this type of behavior.
Right, because I'm sure there's different levels of it and different stages of it, because some of this behavior is diagnosable. So it's narcissistic, it's very manipulative, it's very calculating. And so it's good to know, who knows what the percentage of these women are that have this kind of epiphany that, oh my gosh, I'm being a mean girl or a mean person. I don't like seeing that behavior in myself. I'm going to change that, versus that's just who they are, just kind of narcissistic, manipulative behavior. And it probably stems from, like you said earlier, a place of fear, where they have a narrative or a story around something a parent did to them, or something a relative did, or something a kid on the playground did. So they've developed this structure around themselves as a protective mechanism almost.
Yep. And it comes back down to, again, liking yourself. I call her the she bully. Like, you know, everybody has that little voice in the back of your head, and are you letting her rule you, or are you letting, you know, your confidence take over? But yeah, there are multiple reasons. I think some women know they're doing it. They also may not know how to stop if it's something that they've been able to get away with, or they feel like they don't have true friends. And so that's their way to, keep people at bay and not, welcome them into the circle. So it could be a plethora of things, but it's sad, that you can't work together. I think there's also, I've had some women say, I'll kind of feel it start to talk to me when maybe I'm a coach and you're a coach, but we're totally different coaches, but I feel like, oh my God, well, she's going to be better than me, so then you think of ways to knock down or make yourself shine a little bit brighter, but that doesn't help anybody.
Right. So you talked about some of the signs just now. What's the impact, both for the person on the receiving end and the person who is, as I said earlier, the perpetrator? What's the impact in their life, on their health, and their social interactions and relationships, both in the office or church or community or even in their own homes?
It can be big. In fact, it can be huge. And chances are, if you're in it, you may not even be aware you're in it. So you might not know how to voice what's going on. But 99.9% of the time, if it's happening at church or if it's happening at work, it's not just staying there with you. You don't say, okay, I'm leaving for the day and leave this situation and pack up and go home and not have it impact you. So it can, if it's continued on for a while and it's steady, it will start to beat you down. And so I'll say your world looks a little bit more gray. You've lost your joy. You lose your voice, because if she's good at it, and remember, it's this intangible behavior, it will cause you to doubt yourself. So there's that component. And when you're starting to feel that way about yourself, that kind of trickles into other areas of your life. It will, let's say it's for work, Sunday morning rolls around and you have a big, huge pit in your stomach all day because you don't want to go to work the next day. I've had a lot of women say they had complete unknown physical ailments that happened, and it's a result of the stress and anxiety. I know I've spoken to some women, certainly I could never diagnose this, but I would not doubt without any thought in my mind that they did not have PTSD after working with or experiencing some of these just crazy women. And so it's the health, it's the mental, it's the physical, it's a little bit of everything. And until often you're out of it, it's hard to really see how deep you are in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's like that in a lot of different relationships, female, male, female, female, there's a lot of ways that can show up, I'm sure. Section 3 of your book, you say that's about how do we address this? How do we change this? How do we make this it's kind of like it's dis-ease. So I don't know that it's a diagnosable disease, but it's
no.
How do we start to address this? And it's a big challenge in the workplace and in the world. How can we make some impact to where it becomes, we take this negativity and this rivalry and we turn it into a victory of some sort?
I think you have to look hard inward. I think you really want to know if you're contributing to these behaviors or not, and what, do you like, I keep going back to do you like yourself, but I think that is key, because women who like themselves like other women. It's just a known fact. Then you have to look at the relationships you are surrounding yourself with, and are they authentic or not? And that can be very hard and very challenging. And, if I'll talk to women and I'll say, well, why? If you feel like when you get up from the table that they're all instantly chit-chatting about you, why are you still friends? Well, because we have a history, or I've known her since college, or our kids grew up together. And just because you have a history with somebody, this could be a friend, this could be a colleague, this could be family. If they're not treating you well, you can remove yourself. And so it's removing the negativity from your life, and that is not easy. And then I've had women say, but how do I find these kick-ass women that are just out there? And well, there's dating sites, there's others, so you have to treat finding your female fierce friends as how you would go about with other relationships. There's networking. There's joining different groups. There's, you know, finding new activities that you are interested in that you can also join to meet other like-minded women. I think I know I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and just in the past couple of years, I've joined a few wonderfully socially networking groups that are women organizations, and I've been just amazed at the fabulous, cool women I've met. So you have to be open to it, and you know, sometimes it might not always work, you know, and you have to give yourself a try or two and think, okay, if this isn't the right group, step back, try something else. So it's being open to what's out there as well.
Yeah, there's a saying, I don't know who said it. If I did know, I would give them credit, but I don't. If you're out there, take credit for this, is that we teach people how to treat us. So I think you're coaching on have a look at yourself and how you're behaving and what your energy level is and how you're presenting yourself and holding space for others, because how you be is how others are going to treat you because you allow it to a certain degree.
Yes, 100%. And with that, on the flip side, I think it's also about what you said. It's setting an example for how you want to be treated, but then mirroring that. We talked earlier about daughters or how young it starts, and mirroring that for the young, fierce females in your life, like what they should not put up with, or how you can teach them to grow and develop these wonderful relationships that so often I think when it occurs with women, they might not have had those positive examples in their life. And so they're just seeing what, you know, they've been taught.
I'm curious, what is your coaching or suggestions to some of our listeners or females out there who are kind of in the middle of what you're describing? Is there an appropriate way to address this with the perpetrator, if you will, so it's not confronting to them and it doesn't blow up into something bigger than it already is? Is there a way that you can have a conversation or sit down with a mediator of some sort so you can clear the air and move forward in a positive way for both sides?
Well, yes and no. I think it depends on who it's with, where it is. I think it depends on how far and how long it's gone on. Because sometimes if you ask somebody, I had this, there's that gaslighting. Well, you're imagining things. I didn't do that. And so it puts it back on you, like you feel crazy. So I think my first big recommendation is to document. Really kind of look at the behaviors, document a pattern. You know, if it starts out slowly and you're aware of it, let's say it's at work, just go have a coffee with somebody or have an offline convo and just say, hey, this is, you know, put it back on you first. That way the other person she won't get defensive, but just say, this is what I'm feeling. I just want to share with you. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but then, you know, if it's at work too and it escalates, they will want proof. And sometimes this type of behavior is hard to have proof, but you want to show a pattern. But then I would certainly ask somebody to help come in and help, you know, collaborate on the conversation. Friends and family, I guess it's just, if it's been a history of that, I would always ask. I think it's good to, one woman I said, well, I don't want to put it back on me. I wouldn't do that. You know, I'm like, well, that's just a way to start a conversation to not have the other person get defensive. But I'm a big, huge advocate of open, transparent communication, and I'm very direct. And so I would say something, but you know, everybody is a little bit different in their approach. So I'd say what works best for you.
Yeah. In your book, you mentioned that men are much less likely to have these types of disloyal, for lack of a better word, you have better words, I'm sure, type of relationships with their male colleagues than females are with their female colleagues. Why is that? I know we're wired differently.
very much wired a lot differently. So I think in the research when I was digging into stuff and, you know, why are men and women so different? So a lot of it stemmed from theories of aggression. And so how males and females handle aggression up until, gosh, probably age 4 or 5, it's about the same. But then the social intelligence kicks in, and girls can start to, you know, their brains kick in a little bit quicker than boys do. And so they can use the indirect aggression. Until that point, they were both, children are both more physically direct in their aggression. So with men or males, they're just usually more direct. So let's say me and Bob are in a meeting talking about something, it gets heated. But then an hour later, we're on the golf course having a beer and laughing like nothing happened. I think with women, we hold grudges and we hang on to things. And often when this competition and rivalry kicks in, it's not always just about what you're talking about at hand. It can include so much more. And usually with men, it is what it is. It's more black and white.
I'm curious. Let me see if I can ask this question to as clear as I can. In your research or in your own observation, does it make a difference in a company culture whether let's say the leadership or the top management is composed primarily of men versus women, how the culture is when it comes to this frenemy rivalry behavior?
I think that can vary. I think a lot, because I know there are a lot of men. I've just actually in the past month or so spoke to 2 men that get it. They get this phenomenon. They've seen it, and they understand that it's going on. So before I might have said, well, a male dominated, you might find more of it, you know, if there are less females or male dominated culture. But I think it's about just seeing it and understanding what open communication and collaboration can do for a culture as a whole. So people feel that they are a true part of the team. And with that is the psychological safety of an organization. So if people feel safe, if they feel that their viewpoint and their thoughts and what they are doing matters, then they feel more a part of the team. And so if that's the case, and if the whole culture is grounded on that, then it's open and it's transparent. And I think there's less room for this type of behavior to occur, because also it's not tolerated. And so, and it wouldn't be just with this type of behavior, it would be with other, you know, negative types of behaviors. It's just, we don't do that around here. So I think it's more of what the leadership does, or what the leadership expects, or what they exude to the rest of the organization.
Yeah, because I think it could become toxic enough that you could have high levels of turnover, and you can't really figure out, why do these women keep leaving? They stick around for 8, 9, 10 months, a year or two, and then boom, they leave. And they don't pinpoint that it may be 1 or 2 women in the organization that are kind of in charge and responsible for this high turnover.
Well, it's good women walk, and often some organizations have no clue, or else maybe that woman is such a bully that maybe some of the men are even scared of her. But that can be huge. And often I've spoken to several men, or in organizational settings, they have no clue why these women are leaving, because if she is really good at her behavior and kicking the women out, they won't see it. It's like they're an ostrich.
She's really good at buddying up to the guys too, I'm guessing.
Yep, probably so. Yes. But then later, you know, I think sometimes it depends on how compartmentalized the organization is too. Well, you do your team, you know, I think if there's a more cohesive feel to the culture, it will provoke a different type of feeling as well. But yeah, I think you're right on but she knows what she's doing. If she's good at it, she's done it before and it works for her. And especially if it's where there's fewer women at the top and she wants to keep climbing, she'll climb.
Is that the big pink elephant in the room you speak about?
Yes, yes, the elephant in the boardroom. Yes, she's sitting there, and I remember, like, clearly, I was on a big consulting project when I lived in Washington, D.C., when I had my epiphany to write, that this is what I was going to do my dissertation on. And I thought, oh my God, this is it. Like, I could see it. I could see how these women were not talking to each other. People would roll off and leave, and it was never talked about. But I'm like, my God, it's sitting there. It's like the carpet right here on the floor. We all see it. But because leadership didn't address it, it wasn't something to be talked about, because then you would fear for your job as well.
So in addition to just establishing a culture of transparency and support and respect foundationally to build your company on, what do you have to say to the men and or leadership who may be listening to this with regard to this challenge, especially in the corporate environment?
Yeah.
And what coaching would you have for them? What suggestions would you have for them?
I have a book coming out that I would offer them to read, but I would take a deep, hard look. If you have a lot of women leaving, there's probably a very clear reason why, and I would have, this is the type of work I do, but or another consulting firm, whatever, come in and you do an assessment, an anonymous assessment, to really get to the root of what the problem is. And whether or not it's female rivalry or other things, you have to know what the underlying issues are to assess what is going on in the organization. And then you have to be very open and willing to the feedback that will come out of it, and taking that and making clear change. And then when you're making that change, you're getting everybody on board with their feedback to do it. So it's not, somebody dictating the change. It is a group effort. And once you start to involve people, people feel heard. They feel like their voice has a true meaning to, contribute. You'll be amazed at how that will change the culture. And it won't be, I talk about this in my book, you can implement bystander training. So, people just know, like, this is a part of your yearly HR training, that these negative behaviors won't be tolerated. And if not, we'll call you out on them.
In your interviews with these women and in the research you've done, is there a certain profile that this Fremini type person, female bully, might possess? And is there any way in the interview process through questions to vet that out so you can avoid bringing them on board in the first place that you know of?
That's a good question. I think they would deny it. I don't, unless, I think if you are hiring within an organization, you could easily do some background checks about, how well someone has played nicely in the sandbox on other teams. I think if it's somebody that's completely new to an organization, this might be a hard one to vet, because I don't know too many people. This goes back to the very first part when we were talking about the other woman and interviewing her. I don't know that many people would own up to that behavior, because it's not nice. So that's a good one, though. I like it. I wish there were something that, like, you could have a questionnaire, or maybe it's even, just spending the day with your team to see, how that happens. Again, if you have somebody coming into a clique of women and they're all cliquey, it could backfire. So it kind of depends.
Yeah. It would be interesting over time. Hopefully this challenge gets better and not worse, so we won't have to kind of figure that out. But it would be interesting to do some research or follow along to see if that's the case. And I think the other important thing is, as an employer of males and females myself, when I have challenging employees who choose to leave our organization, I always say, we will never fire you, but here are the 5 or 6 things that will mean that you have chosen to leave our organization. So it turns into, they've made the choice. I'm not the one choosing it for them. They're choosing it for themselves. But when someone calls me for a
Yeah.
background check, or would you rehire this individual, I'm honest. I say no, I would not. And I'm
Yeah.
going to tell you exactly why I wouldn't. Because if you're
Yes.
wanting to instill this transparency and this trust and this mutual respect in the culture of your company, this person is going to be a thorn in your side.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm very honest with that too. It doesn't mean, I think you don't have to be mean, but honest is honest. And I think that's twofold. You're relaying truthful information about that individual, but it's also a representation of you. And if you were false about that, and you just don't know who you don't know and whose circles people are in, and that could backfire against you in the long run too if you weren't honest in your review or input.
I'm wondering what parenting has to do with this behavior showing up in, especially young in these gals' ages. What would you advise parents to do to help us overcome this challenge and not parent in a way that we're creating mean girls and bullies and frenemies?
Mm-hmm. I think it's looking at the behavior you are exuding, because they are always watching. You can talk till the cows come home, but if you are demonstrating something else, that's what they're going to model. So I think it starts with inclusion. It starts with kindness. It starts with just the open conversations that everybody's different, and to not judge and welcome people in. Are you going to be best friends with everybody? Absolutely not. Like, I have different rings of circles. I call on my really close group, and then they get wider as the different social groups or work that I interact with. With that being said, you don't have to be unkind to anybody. And I think it's also teaching your kids to stick up for other people, because it's that bystander thing. Because if you, and this is taught in a lot of bullying types of training, if you are watching a behavior happen and you're doing nothing about it, you're equally at fault. So it's little things, but it's constant reminders and behaviors. And they'll see it. They see what you do, and they see if you have groups of friends and how you are interacting with other people. And so, I write a lot. I talked a lot to mothers and daughter groups, and that's a big deal. You're their role model, so you have to check yourself sometimes to see what you're doing.
Absolutely. You don't want to be sitting around with your girlfriends having lunch and one of them leaves, and then you all start to talk about her, and your little girl's sitting there watching you. Wait,
Yeah.
what is this? You're right, because they pick up on everything.
Everything.
At such a young age. Is there a favorite chapter in your book or section of your book or conversation you had with the gals that you interviewed in your book that you can talk to us about?
I'd say later on in the book, one of my favorite interviews was Al that mentioned she'd worked at Hooters, and how just awesome all these women were. And she said it was probably one of the best female environments that she'd ever worked in. I love those stories. Like, those are the stories that totally light me up, because I know it's out there and I know it's possible. And she had said you wouldn't expect it from this group, because people think, oh, Hooters is, well, people have a picture in mind about Hooters. But she said it was the strongest group of women. They all were very independent. They stood up for each other, and she knew that's how she wanted to treat other, and environments that she worked in, she knew that's the type of environment she liked. So probably that, because I think if women are getting to that point where they are overcoming and they are finding that they are finding a group of women that is their tribe or their circle or whatever you call it, whether or not something so negative has happened to them, they're able to move on. And chances are, if they've moved on and they're in that type of situation where they're really in a great place, they're taking those lessons and they're sharing it with other women. And because they know how they do not want to be treated. And I think that's huge. That's a part of how this is as well. Of course, we hope it never even gets to that, but if you've been burned, you know you don't want to get burned again.
Yeah, that seems like that makes sense to me. Hooters, what a
Yeah.
great thing. You wouldn't think, but it's really a homogeneous group of women that
Yeah.
are physically sure of themselves, and
Yes.
physically they show up boldly, and
Mhm.
they're pretty strong-willed, it seems like. So that makes sense. But
Yeah.
just on the surface, you wouldn't think that. You'd think that maybe there'd be a lot of rivalry in that type
Yeah.
of group.
Because it's like looks and it's beautiful women that work there. And she said it was nothing like that. And I asked her why she thought that was. And she said, she goes, I think we had nothing to prove to anybody else but ourselves. And we all were working our way through college. And so we just had our mindset on the prize of something else that was unique to all of us. And so we weren't competing at all. We were just there to get work done and support each other as we could. So I thought that's pretty cool.
That's great. So we
Yeah.
can look to the Hooters culture for a good example of
Yeah.
how women can get along in the work.
Bonding with your women. Yes.
I like it. I know that writing a book is no easy task, and it's certainly not for the lighthearted. I've written a book, and I've been through that process myself, but I'm wanting to know from you, what's the one thing that you wish you would have known before you started writing your book?
Oh gosh. That's a tough one. One thing I learned right when I was writing, I'd already started writing, was the ins and outs of all the publishing. And that seemed very gray to me. It's kind of confusing. You have your self-publishing, you have the hybrid publishing, you have the big publishers. So that was a big step to learn the ins and outs of that. In terms of the actual topic, I was just excited to learn more about it. And I think writing it helped me learn more. And, I kept getting interviews along the way and I've seen how women come full circle. But yeah, it's a process. It's certainly not something that you're going, that you're going to blink and say, okay, in 2 months, I'm going to have a book done. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah. At least a first-time author. It may get easier with time, but when it's right out of the gate, your first time with this experience, like anything, the first time is usually the most challenging. It gets easier with time. Was there anything that helped you get the book written? And when you had those days you sat down to write, or the research was getting convoluted, or you weren't feeling like pounding out another 1,000 words or so?
You know what? It was COVID. I'll be completely honest. This had kind of been in the back of my head for a bit, and then COVID hit, and I had to pivot my business to a degree, and my kids were home, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to write a certain amount of words a day, and I'm going to take this opportunity where I'm not as readily, interacting with people as I have been, or talking, or doing the things that the other path was doing. I'm taking this time to really focus on this, which will ultimately really highlight my topic that I talk about. So yeah, I gave myself a timeline, and I'd say that's probably what helped push me through. So I'm like, that's what I'm going to get done during this. And granted, we're still in it, but I did get it done.
I always say to view every experience as a gift, and COVID brought a lot of gifts our way, I think. Speaking of COVID, I'm curious, now that you bring that up, do you have any conversations that would reveal, or any reading you've done that would indicate if COVID changed how this frenemy and rivalry stuff shows up in the workplace, because so many people went digital or online?
I've had some women tell me they think it's worse.
Really?
And yes, and that is something I really want to dive in and do some more studying on, because I think that could be a survey type of thing just to get some data. But they said, I've had several women tell me they think it's worse because you're behind a screen. So if you're in an organizational setting, you only see what's in front of you, and then behind the scenes and how work is getting done is not so readily, which female rivalry is not always readily obvious, but it's hidden more now because everybody's in their own place. And because people are, the other part of this is because you're not all together as you were before, people are competing more for the attention of leadership or whomever it is that, you know, gets you from A to B. And so that is another sticking point why some women have said it's worse.
Yeah, and I'm sure people, you know, it's different when you get up and change into your work clothes and go to a place to work each day versus you're in your home with probably other people and you're not used to that, and there's tension and stress and the environmental things start to play into this. So more of the real person starts to bubble to the surface.
Yes, and I've had other women say in not the working environment aspect, but in the social aspect, it's the like portraying things to be better than they are on social media. And so there's that always trying to one up each other that way, when chances are we're all kind of feeling some of the same things, but some people aren't portraying that or don't want to share that, but they're showing everything is rosy and happy. And so one woman had a whole conversation with me about how she thinks it's much worse from that perspective. And I hadn't thought of it. I don't think I've experienced it, but that's, again, everybody, it's getting these different viewpoints to get the full picture of it.
Yeah, because reality shows up on a Zoom call when your husband walks by in his boxer shorts and your kid has cereal in their hair and
and your dog's barking and
there's a lot of dynamics going on that don't go to the workplace with you. If readers could take one thing from your book, what would it be?
That you are not alone. That I've had so many women come up and tell me that when I've talked, I didn't know it was as big as what it is. And I do a thing often when I speak about having women raise their hands about how, if they've encountered certain different types of rivalries, whether from grade school, college, work, life, sport, you know, whatever it could be. And usually by the end, and I've asked all the questions, every hand is raised, because it's not, it doesn't stereotype. No one is off limits. It doesn't care where you live, doesn't care what you do, what car you drive. And so, but it's not talked about. And so to know you are not alone, I think that's another aspect of uniting together to overcome this behavior, because people need to get pissed off about it, because it shouldn't happen anymore. And what we can do together is so much more.
Yeah, and I think circling back to something you said earlier is to, you know, have a board meeting with You Inc. Go stand in front of the mirror, go on a walk, and have a chat and say, where in my life am I not feeling worthy? Where in my life do I have a narrative around not being good enough? And when am I going to be willing to quit dragging that around with me in life and accepting that I'm a beautiful, capable human being? And that's how I'm going to start showing up. And that's the space I'm going to hold for others to show up. And I'm going to be honest with myself and the conversations we have with ourselves. I always say, if you're self-talk, there's 3 questions to ask when you're having a conversation with yourself. Is what you just said to yourself true?
Yeah.
Is it making the situation better?
Mm-hmm.
And does it serve you in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah.
If the answer to all 3 of those questions is yes, then okay, that's probably not such a bad conversation to have with self. But if the answer to even one of those questions is no, it's probably best to have a different conversation, because we get to choose.
Well, let it lie. And the things we say to ourselves often, in a million years, we would never say to somebody else.
Yep.
Like, we're worse to ourselves than we are to other people.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree with that. Well, I have to say I've enjoyed this chat. Your book was great. I want everyone out there to mark your calendars for May of this year, because Amber's book is going to be available on her website. Amber, I'm going to let you tell us more about that in a second. It's called Behind Friendly Lines, Rising Above Female Rivalry, and it will be in bookstores in November. And I will put access to your website, your Facebook and Instagram accounts, and LinkedIn, I believe. Is there anything else you would like people to know as far as how to be in contact with you? Because you also do consulting and coaching.
I do, yes. So through all of those, I'm active on all of those social media channels, and I'm active on my website. And so as soon as I have the rights to start doing pre-orders and to sell my book, I will definitely post that. So keep on checking, and I'll of course send out updates on social media about that as well, and how to buy it. But yes, those are the main things. And the ebook I think will come out in August. So yeah, baby steps, but it's getting there.
Two final questions for you. One is, what should I have asked you, but I didn't know enough to ask you?
Goodness, you asked some good questions. I guess I'll flip it. After reading it, did you think it had ever happened to you and you didn't know about it?
As I reflected back in my own corporate career, and I was not in corporate America very long before I became an entrepreneur, but there was one case, and this was a case, looking back on it, where it was a female, and she was very manipulative and I think diagnosably narcissistic. Yeah. And so with the wisdom I have today, looking back on that, I would look at all of her behaviors and say that had nothing to do with me, which I also encourage our listeners to remind themselves of. For sure. Their behavior toward you has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. And so that was probably the one that I could recall, but it didn't happen very often in my life. And I think for two reasons for me is I was raised with two brothers, one older, one younger. The neighbors were boys. I was raised around guys, just a lot of guys. And I think my behavior in the work world is I'm wired more like a guy. It's like, okay, whatever, I don't want to waste time making this more dramatic or mean more than it really does. It only means what I think it means. And what I think it means isn't even true to begin with. So let's just let that go and go have the beer. Let's go golf.
Exactly. We'll go play golf and have the beer.
And the final question is, I looked at your Facebook a little bit, and you talk more than once about your superpower, women's superpower. What's your superpower?
My superpower, I've had a couple people tell me that I help people make good connections.
You're a connector.
Yeah, I'm a connector.
Superpower.
Thank you. Yeah.
Really. So everyone, please mark your calendar. May of this year, get on and follow Amber on her social media accounts. She will have books available for you to buy on her website. And then in November, you can find Behind Friendly Lines, Rising Above Female Rivalry in bookstores. If you have any questions otherwise about how she could help you in your corporate environment or in your personal relationships as it relates to this topic, go to her website, get in touch with her. I know you have consultation time frames where people can have a question or a little short.
Yeah, discovery sessions, absolutely.
So take advantage of all these great things that Amber is providing to you, and good luck with the book. We'll have another chat. Maybe we'll give it a couple months after it's out there in the world. We'll swing back and have another chat to see how it's going.
Perfect. I would enjoy that. Thank you for your time and having me on your show. This has been fun.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you. Yeah. All right, everyone, go out there and make it a kick-ass rest of the day, and we will talk with you again soon.